A U.S. bankruptcy judge ruled that Celsius owned most of the crypto that customers deposited. The judge also said the company doesn't have enough money to repay the $4.2 billion across 600,000 accounts. The ruling likely puts these customers at the back of the line for repayment, behind secured creditors and those who had non-interest-bearing accounts.
Now look at you. All back of the bus.
That feeling you get when the money you thought was yours sadly is not. Customers of Celsius found out the hard way that they will get their money back in a quick and timely manner. Not. Investors may need to get comfortable while the mega fraudster gets his ducks in a row.
New York Attorney General Letitia James sued former Celsius CEO Alex Mashinsky yesterday, alleging that he defrauded thousands of investors. The AG claims Mashinsky lied to investors about the extent of losses when he was CEO of the now bankrupt crypto lending company. Mashinsky publicly assured customers that investing with Celsius was safer and more lucrative than leaving their investments in a bank. In a statement, the AG said, quote, "As the former CEO of Celsius, Alex Mashinsky promised to lead investors to financial freedom, but led them down a path of financial ruin." Celsius entered bankruptcy proceedings with less than $2 billion in crypto assets, far from the nearly $5 billion it owed users. James seeks to ban the former CEO from working in the securities industry or as an executive in New York State and to have him pay for damages. Mashinsky did not immediately respond to CNBC's requests for comment. The suit was brought under the Martin Act, which gives state prosecutors widespread authority to investigate securities fraud. Sticking with Celsius, a new ruling could make customers last in line to collect funds from the bankrupt crypto lender. A U.S. bankruptcy judge ruled earlier this week that Celsius owns most of the crypto that customers deposited. I spoke to Bradley Duke, the co-CEO of ETC, about the takeaways from this ruling and whether the industry has enough consumer protections in place. Let's start with that ruling and what it means for Celsius and its customers.
Yeah, well, look, I think it's always important when anybody's investing their hard-earned savings that they read the small print. What the judge said was that it was very, it was unequivocal in the terms of use. Were very clear about the fact that as soon as the funds entered the Earn program, that they were now owned by Celsius Networks and no longer by the investors. And I think that's really it's always worth imagining the kind of worst case scenarios when one's investing and reading the small print with that in mind. How is it set up? Is there a trustee involved in case the company in question goes bankrupt? And where will you stand in terms of other creditors if there is insolvency proceedings? Yeah, I think if you had to, looking back on 2022, the dominant theme was really a loss of trust in players in crypto by the investment community. And I think that's generally because of where we had some very, very bright minds with wonderful ideas executing their ideas. What was lacking was good governance and proper business procedure and things that are not very interesting, but actually super important in terms of the longevity of a company and running, continuing to operate as a successful going concern. So that's really been highlighted. I think, just speaking about the point before, I think it's really worth doing due diligence on any company that one is considering investing in, and not just following a sort of a herd mentality whereby people or some serious companies have invested in this company, so then it must be fine. I think that can lead to trouble, as we saw with a lot of big name companies that were embarrassed by the collapse of FTX and others. And I think it's really worthwhile just trying to look at the management as well and seeing what experience they have, because experience in financial services is different kind of experience when, in terms of running a company. When you're now holding client assets and if you don't understand the importance of segregation of assets, of segregating different parts of the business, where there could be a conflict of interest. These are areas which are quite highly regulated in financial services, but in crypto, they have not yet been regulated.
The comparison to the FTX debacle can only be ignored for so long. The question is, how long will it take for customers to see their assets again? Will it be before we're all rusted and obsolete? I mean fat and old.
So you brought up FTX. So I want to start there, and then I also want to talk about regulation. Both the FTX and Celsius bankruptcy cases face drawn-out processes, but can you walk me through your expectations for the FTX case and how long it will be before customers see any of their money, if they ever will at all?
Well, I think that's sadly, I think it's going to be a very long time. If we look at what happened with Mt. Gox, that still hasn't been resolved, and the Bitcoin that was recovered still hasn't been returned to investors in that, or people who made deposits into that platform. So I expect that if anybody has got funds locked up in either of those companies, expect it to be a long process. It's going to be drawn out. It's going to have to go through at the speed of the legal systems, which can often be slow. And really, I don't see that resolving for at least a few years.
So let's pivot to regulation. I mean, there are many lessons that could be learned from the turmoil we saw at the end of 2022. How much work is needed to be done, and what should be the priority for regulators in terms of protecting consumers or adding some sort of guardrail to this industry?
Look, I think it's essential that there is some well-planned, well-conceived regulation that's put in place for crypto. I don't want to regulate the magic of crypto. I mean, there's been so much innovation that's happened these past years, so many exciting developments in DeFi, etc. But you need to have at least a minimum of regulation in place to protect the end investors from what we saw happening this past year, where there was real abuse, I would say, by the management, and often maybe just because of lack of experience. But nonetheless, it's still abuse when funds that have been deposited into a so-called crypto exchange are being used for bets on a VC companies, and that's with an entirely different risk profile and term periods for those investments. It's just it's a real problem, and I think with a minimum of regulation around segregation of funds. And also, I think a separation of what is called an exchange and what is what is brokerage. I think those are very important areas that in the world of crypto had been blurred up until now.